Welcome to the College Football X with your hosts, Jon Nelson and John Wilkerson.
Welcome to another round of the OSG on CFB. It's the College Football X. X Factors coming at us from a couple of different places this week. Wilkie catches up with Chris Mooneyham to talk Coaching Carosel and the cancellation of Ohio State and Michigan. Welcome to Carosel, as now is the time for renewal. Also on the board, we go to Conway, South Carolina, where I catch up with Joe Cashion, the play-by-play voice of Coastal Carolina, who had undisputedly the game of the year in college football, Coastal Carolina BYU. We go over that week with Joe, a tremendous conversation, and great to catch up with him as a friend of the show and a friend of the network. So it is me, just John, it is Wilkie, it is Chris Mooneyham, and it is Joe Cashion coming up just around the corner. It's the College Football X. Stick and stay. We'll be right back.
You are listening to the College Football X on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
Welcome back to the OSG on CFB. It is the X, and one of our X Factors has been one of the X Factors all season long. Joe Cashion, the play-by-play voice of Coastal Carolina. Sir, you had a week, didn't you?
Yeah, John, you can kind of say that. A week is kind of a word and a half for what went on, over the past 7-8 days as we get into just all of the aftermath of what happened. I was telling my wife last night, we're sitting here looking at this Troy game this weekend, and, we're still scheduled to play that. And she said, what do you think will happen? I said, of course, I don't have any insider knowledge. As far as I know, we're playing the thing, and we're going to go play it. I said, look, last week didn't start until Wednesday night, Thursday morning, so we're still way too soon on what's going to happen this week. Who knows?
All right, so after we talked last week, everything fell apart. Everything got picked up all over again. The house got reassembled, and you guys put on a show. I can get a feeling for how much madness there was in bits and pieces of it. But from your perspective, how was the madness?
What day did we talk? Was that like Tuesday, I think it was? Yep. Monday or Tuesday, early in the week. So anyway, we get to Wednesday. And, of course, we're still on for Liberty. We're still making plans. I'm still getting charts ready and whatnot and planning the broadcast. And I did a Zoom call like this with their broadcasters, with Alan York and Nick Pierce. And we went down memory lane, and we talked about some of the great Liberty Coastal battles. And I tell you what, no more than maybe 30 minutes to an hour after I got off with them, we start seeing texts. We start seeing indications that things weren't really good in Lynchburg, and that, their quarterback, their all-everything quarterback, had tested positive for COVID. And I thought, that's not good. That doesn't look good for this game. And if he's got it, there's probably some other guys who've tested, probably coaches. And one thing just kind of led to another as that afternoon progressed. I'm texting our AD, and he's hearing the same things, and they're starting to talk. And, of course, this is against the backdrop of game day being in town just for this game anyway, And so I imagine, I know game day got involved, and, it finally, the negotiations, I guess, the communication among, Liberty and Coastal. And then as BYU came into the picture, all of that started the ball rolling on that late in the evening, late in the afternoon, that kind of thing. And, so our coaches really started looking at BYU, to be honest with you, on Wednesday night. Still had Liberty on the docket, hoping to get them. And then it's like, okay, if BYU comes to town, if that's what winds up happening, we need to start getting a look at these guys. And so they started looking at that. And, I'm like, well, what do I do with my charts? What are we going to do with my interviews and stuff that's going on? And, start reworking all that. And then Thursday morning we wake up, and I'm like, today's going to be crazy. It's going to be a crazy day because something's going to happen one way or another. And then, of course, about 9:30, we put the release out that, due to, the COVID protocols and the testing and the positives, at Liberty would not be able to play. And we've got a schedule change now. BYU's coming to town. This on Thursday morning. We're going to play them Saturday afternoon. And, you start looking at BYU information. You try to pull up notes and, old depth charts perhaps to find out if, what they have, if they don't have anything new, their stats, pronunciation guides and all that kind of thing. And it's just, John, I could sit here for probably an hour and talk to you about the craziness of the week. But suffice it to say, it really didn't start until Thursday morning, the week.
And the thing is I think that both schools deserve a boatload of credit for just stepping up and sitting there saying, look, I need an opponent. You need an opponent. Let's dial it up. And BYU put their trucks on the road before the ink was even dry on the contract, and they got there in time. And BYU equipment was on Twitter, and they're showing you what's going on with this 18-wheelers heading from Utah to Conway. I think that both schools and all of the infrastructure that is involved there deserve a tremendous amount of credit for doing something like this on basically 72 hours notice.
No question about it. Both schools deserve a tremendous amount of kudos and credit. And like you say, the equipment truck was really on the road on Wednesday. I think when they found out, it may not necessarily have been us, but I think they kind of got a heads up that, hey, we could have a game for you guys this weekend. Boom, drive east, guys, and we'll tell you where to go once you get across the Mississippi. We'll tell you where to go, and that's really about the only way they could have gotten there on time from where they came from. But, I mean, just to put it together and then have the kind of game that we had, I mean, that was just a phenomenal football game. Not a lot of people gave Coastal much of a chance in this thing. I mean, everybody on game day picked against us, and just about everybody out there talking said, well, how's this going to help BYU? How's it help playing Coastal? How's this going to help them? I mean, where are they going to get next week in the college football playoff? And, there wasn't a whole lot of talk about what if Coastal wins, how could it help them? So, but yeah, the whole thing, the way it came together, and then the level of the game was just phenomenal.
And there was, I think, one personification of Coastal's approach going against BYU. It was the 94-yard drive. And I think that basically keeping the ball away from BYU's offense and making sure that the point of attack was taken care of by Coastal, and going from one end of the field to the other, I think was really the personification of the attack that was constructed to go against a team that their backs were larger than their front when they were down in a three-point stance. I don't think that's in any dispute. But getting to the point of attack, taking care of those big bodies, getting there first, I think was key. And that 94-yard drive, I think, was part and parcel to how the approach was going to work.
I did a lot of radio hits from folks from Utah wanting to know, okay, what does Coastal do? What did they like to do offensively? What is Jamie Chadwell offense? And that 94-yard drive encapsulates everything about what Coach Chadwell wants to do. And that is control the ball, control the clock, grind out first downs, keep the other team's offense off the field, rest our defense, and get points. And that's what Jamie Chadwell offense does. And they asked me, I had several questions on this, what would be an early indicator that Coastal was in this game and that things were going our way and that we would have a chance? And that's exactly what I said. You know what? I said, if we take the ball early, and let's say we get a stop or two, and then we can go and control the clock and grind them down a little bit and get some points, that's going to be an indicator to me that, okay, we've got this thing going the way we want it to go. Now, the big question was, could our, smaller than average offensive line, could we move these guys on that BYU front? Now, they've got some guys on that BYU front that are, talking about going to the NFL, and there's no question about that. They've got a couple of studs in there, but our guys up front compete, and they get after it, and we control that line of scrimmage, really from that drive all night long. We were able to do that, and we got that score and, had a lead at the end of the first quarter, and I thought, okay, we're here to play tonight. And this is not going to be, BYU's not going to run away from us. We're going to be right here at the end. And that drive really was the tone setter, in my opinion.
And I think that this game is a personification of what college football on a weekly basis should be. You had all of those marquee schools from the Power 5 conferences. They were on the grid as well, and they're on your favorite network of choice. But they were all blowouts, and it was painful to watch. But then when you have these two schools going at it, with Coastal Carolina and BYU put up on 3 days' notice, let's just go ahead, dust it off, and play, and you had a group of 5 school going up against an independent, and you're beating the stew out of each other for 60 minutes, I think it's what college football should be these days, instead of looking at all of the Power Fives and all the shiny objects headed to the CFP. And I think that this game was probably a statement for really what college football should get back to.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think G5s and, there's a lot to offer that we can go play. And you don't need 2 weeks or 3 weeks notice to do it. And the level of the game, just a couple of turnovers for each team. I mean, one of them was a pass at the end of the half that you're just trying to throw in there, and then very few penalties. I thought it was well played, well coached on both sides. And again, like you say, just dust off the ball, put it out there on the tee at the 35, couple of days notice, and let's go play. And one of the big arguments against G5s being included in some sort of expansion of the CFP, which I think has to happen at some point. And I don't know why this year of all years you can't do that. I think, the argument has always been, well, the G5s, they're just going to get a blowout. They're just going to get blown out. Well, holy friggin' mackerel, what have we watched for the last 6 or 7 years of the college football playoff? Nothing but blowouts. You kidding me? We can get in there and play with these guys. I mean, now we may not win. We might be underdogs in some of these games, but we can play. And the show that was put on Saturday night, I mean, how many people came out and said, wow, it's a game of the year? Now, there have been some heck of a good football games. I know there have been some good games across the board this year. Texas, Oklahoma was a great one. There have been a handful of others. But, I mean, that game the other night, you find me a better one, honestly. And it was a G5 and an independent, like you mentioned.
You mentioned, we call them Go Fives on the show. You call them G5s, we call them Go Fives, group of five. What would stop Go Fives or G5s from just breaking off and doing their own version of this? Because if we're seeing the CFP be what it is for Power Fives and it's blowout city and you got all the TV revenue and everything, what should stop the Go Fives and the G5s from doing their own version if the football is going to be like we saw on Saturday?
That's a great question. I wish I had a great answer for you. I think, you just said maybe part of it, the TV revenue. As long as ESPN controls what goes on with the college football playoff, and they're the driving force behind all of that, and they also control the bowls, where do the G5s or the Go Fives, however you want to term it, where do we go then in that case for some sort of revenue? Who's going to put that on TV for the country to watch? I mean, I'm no athletic director. I'm not an administrative kind of guy. I'm just a radio guy. But what happens in that case? I mean, do we give up what we have now to try to go and do that? I mean, I thought about that maybe a good idea. I would love to see some way that the G5s can have a playoff. I mean, when you get right down to it, what is the only group of college football schools in the country? D1, D2. FCS, D3, that really has no access to a playoff right now. It's the Go Fives and the G5s. Mm-hmm. I mean, that we get the bone thrown to us with the New Year's Six, and that's a lucrative game. There's no question about that. I'd love to see Coastal get in the New Year's Six, and we'll find out here in a little bit where we stand in that. And if we could get there, that's a nice thing for us and for our conference. But where do we go for the playoff? What do we do? I don't know what the good answer to that is, and maybe your idea is the right one.
All right, so let's go to the last drive of the game. What's going through your mind in the booth? In full disclosure, the boss and I, as we were driving back from the plains watching an SEC game, made a point to pick up your broadcast on radio. We wanted to listen to your version, and we were alternating offensive drives. It's like if Coastal was on offense, we listened to you. BYU was on offense, we found the BYU broadcast. And so we're going back and forth the whole time. Go through for me and for our listeners what it was like for that last drive of the game to call it from the booth.
I was just trying to engage my nose to breathe for my brain. If you really want to know the truth. Honestly, I felt pretty good because they had less than a minute and no timeouts, and they had to go 82 yards with the football, and they got a holding call right from the get-go. Now, we were talking about should that be a 10-second runoff. Well, I sent an email to an official friend of mine who's an official in the ACC, and he said no, and this is why it's not, because the time already went off the clock. Essentially, it was a live ball foul. So we weren't right on that. The officials got that one right, so that's why there was no 10-second runoff. I was okay until Wilson hit that pass up near midfield, and then I thought, oh, God. And I'm going to tell you what, that kid has as live an arm as I think I've ever seen in person. I mean, you want to talk about a kid that can just sling it with velocity. Well, he gets that thing up near midfield, and I thought, well, you know what? Now they got a shot at the end zone from there. And as you've seen through the years, Flutie to Phelan, Cordell Stewart to Michael Westbrook, those kinds of crazy things can happen. And then I started thinking about that. And then they hit a couple of more plays and get down there. And now they got it with 3 seconds at our 18. And I thought, guys, just one more play. Just can we move him around? Can we make him uncomfortable? Make him throw a ball that he's not prepared to throw? what's our coverage going to be down the field, and make sure we tackle somebody if they're not in the end zone. And fortunately, we did kind of move him a little bit, but he threw that thing over there to Milne, and as soon as he caught it, I was like, up. And then next thing you know, Sadipo comes in there, our safety. He wraps him up, puts him down, and I'm like, he didn't get there. It's all over. I just looked at Lane Harris, my partner. I was like, just that number right there. Just put my arms up. We win it. It's all over. And after that, I can't even really remember what I said. I know that call wound up several places, but it was just crazy. What a finish! What a great finish!
What is this? What has Mormons versus Mullets meant to Conway?
Oh, wow! I mean, that thing really took off, didn't it? It was somebody came up with that slogan last week, and a bunch of T-shirts have been sold. But I'm gonna tell you this: I mean, game day being in Conway and kind of being the driving force, behind all of that was just. I mean, I can't even put a price tag on those 3 hours Saturday morning. What Coastal and Conway and our part of the state got out of all that. It's just phenomenal. And then again, going back to the way this game came about, and the magnitude of it and the high rankings of both teams, and then the show that eventually came from it. You kind of wondered if all the hoopla and all that kind of stuff, the game wouldn't live up to the hype. Well, it did that and then some. I mean, it was just a phenomenal, wild, upside down, crazy week and a great finish to top it all off.
And I know that you're still getting prepared for Troy, and I know that that's on the grid right now. It has been a tremendous run so far, and I know a lot of folks are looking at that game this week and sitting there saying, just focus on the task at hand because the job isn't done.
Exactly. I've been telling people this week, too, that on the one hand, this game means nothing. In terms of the Sun Belt, we've already wrapped up the East. We're going to be in the Sun Belt Championship on the 19th against Louisiana at home. So in terms of the Sun Belt and where we are, it means nothing. And then on the other, it means everything. I mean, we got to win it. We got to win it if we want to stay in the New Year's Six hunt, And now with Cincinnati and Tulsa having been canceled this weekend, they're only going to play one time. So that kind of, that's kind of a bummer to sit here and see that happen in another league. And we're still going to go and play this game. But, these are the cards that we've been dealt, and we got to go play it, and we got to go win it and set ourselves up for the conference championship. And then hopefully if we can win these two, and get ahead of Cincinnati somehow if they stumble against Tulsa, we're right there where we want to be.
Lay it out for me. Hit the promo one more time for folks that want to pay attention this weekend for everything going on with Coastal. Lay it on me.
Okay, you can go to goccusports.com and look for the Chantacleer free audio. Our broadcast will be at 1 o'clock Central. That's when we start for the 2 o'clock Central start. You can also Google up WRNN, Hot Talk 99.5 in Myrtle Beach. You can go there to their website and get the free streaming link. And you can also Google that same TuneIn link. You can Google them up on TuneIn and pull it up on that and listen to us that way. If you're not in the Myrtle Beach immediate area, it has a pretty strong signal, but those are the ways you can take our broadcast in. And again, we're on at 1 p.m. Central for the 2 p.m. Central kick.
Joe Cashion, play-by-play voice of the Coastal Carolina Chants. My friend, it's great to have you back, especially after the game of the year in college football. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it's the game of the year in college football, and you're not going to knock me off that perch. Thanks for being a part of the show, as always, for being one of our X Factors. You are awesome. Fantastic call, fantastic game. Keep it rolling, my friend. Save your voice.
John, thanks so much for having me on and to relive the greatness that was last week. Thanks so much.
OSG on CFB continues. More after this.
The online sports guys would love to hear from you. Go to our Twitter page at OSG Sports for a comment, rant, or just whatever's on your mind about college football. Now, back to the College Football X.
The College Football X continues. John Wilkerson here with you with Chris Mooneyham, who's a weekly guest on our podcast from 680 The Fan in Atlanta. Chris, always nice to have you on.
Thank you, buddy. Good to be back with you.
Chris, I want you to take a second and spin the coaching carousel. Can you do that for me? I'm building the drama. Okay, no, but where do you want to start? Shane We
Beamer?
spare no expense with the sound effects here on the College Football X. Yeah, let's start with Shane Beamer.
I love when we do things on the fly. I love when we do things on the fly. We didn't plan that beforehand. Can the listeners tell we didn't plan that?
Oh, I'm sure they can, and they're chuckling as we speak. Shane Beamer at South Carolina. It's something I brought up with one of our earlier discussions about South Carolina. As I recall, it kind of surprised you, but here he is. He's got the job. What do you think?
Yeah, I just didn't know if that was going to be the next step for him. I mean, it makes sense. You were absolutely right in your initial thought process. Of course, he has experience there. What did he spend 4 seasons? I think it was under Spurrier. If it wasn't 4 seasons, I'm close. 3 to 5. The late portion of last decade, 07 through 010 or 11, I guess. Well, it would have been through 10. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, he knows the area. Obviously, he knows the state. I think that. Obviously, the goal for any coach is to get to the SEC in so many ways. No disrespect meant to any of the other conferences or programs across America, but that's where it's at right now. We'll see where it is in 10 years and 15 and 20 years. But right now, the SEC is where it's at. I think he'll be a good fit there. He obviously is a good recruiter. He knows the South well. This will be his, I guess, 5th job in the South, if memory serves, just off the top of my head. So I like the hire. I think he'll be ready. He's a meticulous guy. Everybody knows that. And, of course, I think it's a good hire, too. And I'll bring this up just one more time because I know I keep bringing it up every time I'm on and we talk about South Carolina or Beamer. Keeping Gunnar Stockton. I bring it up for good reason because I've seen this kid a lot. He is the real deal. He's a guy who could be a National Football League quarterback. I believe that if he continues his natural progression. And he is probably their number one recruit. Their number one goal is to keep Gunnar Stockton for this next class.
And it's one thing to have the bloodlines, which he does with Frank Beamer being his father, and highly successful at Virginia Tech. And, of course, Shane was on the Virginia Tech staff for 4 years in the early 2010s. But he also served as a GA with Phil Fulmer at Tennessee. You mentioned Steve Spurrier at South Carolina when he was there from 07 to 10. And then he was with Kirby Smart at Georgia for a couple of years. And then with Lincoln Riley for 3 years. So he's done a good job in his apprenticeship and getting ready for a job like this.
Yeah, and Kirby has spoken as glowingly as Kirby will. He's from that school of Nick Saban. He'll say nice things about you, but he'll only go so far. But he's spoken glowingly in Kirby's own way of Beamer. The other thing about it, too, is I wonder about the coaching staff he'll be able to put together. I think now with Beamer getting this job, a lot of the guys you just mentioned are kind of on notice that Coach Beamer, once he gets in that hot seat, once he gets at the big desk in the big office at South Carolina, he's going to start making some finality type calls where I bet he's already reached out to some folks. I would say if you're one of the coaches that you just mentioned, you might want to be on alert because some of your guys may be getting pilfered at some point here pretty soon.
And I wonder if one of those phone calls might be to Bud Foster to see if he wants to come out of retirement and try his hand at South Carolina. I'm just saying.
Yeah, sure. How old is Bud now? You know, I got to be honest, I don't even know the answer to that. And does he still have the juice? Does he still have the interest in getting back into it? Maybe it's a job that he thinks about taking for 2 or 3 years to help Shane get settled in, to maybe have someone serve a hot young defensive potential coordinator serve underneath him in a tutelage type spot. I could see that for Foster coming out for 2 or 3 years out of retirement and then going back into the riding back out into the sunset. But 5, 6, 7, 8 years, I'm not so sure about that.
I was just kind of having fun with you and with our listeners as well, just bringing up a name.
Well, you never know.
You never know. Exactly.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah, you never know.
Vanderbilt. So, we hear Clark Lee. We hear Jamie Chantwell at Coastal. The same number of names we've heard with the South Carolina job. The one that's kind of really raising my eyebrow and wondering why is I saw Jeff Fisher's name on a list. I don't know what to think of that.
Well, yeah, does Fisher have the juice? Does he have the want to get back into it? And is college really the way he would want to go? I think that would be part of my thought process there. Obviously, he has ties to that part of the country, this part of the country, the South. I think it'd be an interesting hire. I think for Vanderbilt, if you have the shot, you go after it 100%. because you bring a guy in of his ilk, and he still could. His name, I still think, has cachet. I've never thought as negatively about Jeff Fisher as a lot of other people have. Everyone who's ever played for Jeff Fisher absolutely loves him. Have you ever heard a negative word from a player, or really even a coordinator, for the most part, against Jeff Fisher? So I think that would be interesting.
Well, all you have to do is watch that documentary that when he was head coach of the LA Rams, to see how much his players and his coaching staff love him.
Yeah.
My point along that lines is it just kind of would go with the track record of Vanderbilt as far as hiring head coaches. You know, you go back 20, 25 years, and they brought in NFL retreads like Rod Dowhauer and Woody Woodenhofer, and before they finally kind of smartened up and brought in Bobby Johnson, who was mediocre at best, but then you go with James Franklin, and it was a little better track record. But my point is, it just seems like they would be bringing in another NFL retread. That's kind of been their history.
Yes, yeah. You know, I hadn't thought of it that way, and I totally see your point. The thing about Fisher, too, is NCAA compliance. They probably have to make sure they have one or two guys on staff that are really keeping up with that. As far as scheme goes and being able to coach the kids, I think that'd be another thing that he'd really have to think about. Scheme, I'm sure he'd be fine with. Coaching up, he'd be fine with. But it's a whole nother matter when you're dealing with 18-year-olds. Now, having said that, it would still be the type of kid that Vanderbilt gets. So you're talking about a serious, studious type of kid who's going to come in and be playing football for the right reasons and also concentrating on their academics. So in that regard, I think Fisher would fit the bill.
And there's probably somebody on that list, an assistant somewhere, that really wants this job. And I would think that would be where they want to pursue, is someone that really is hot after the job and sees this as an opportunity.
Yeah, we spoke on this once before, and I admitted to you openly, and I've said this on the air here on the station in Atlanta, that I'm kind of mixed. I really don't know what Vanderbilt should do. Should they go after an established retread type of coach, but somebody that is known, a name that you can put some cachet behind that will draw attention? Or should you go the hot coordinator type route, somebody who's starting to build a name or has built a little bit of a name, who kids may know on the recruiting circuit? It's an interesting job. It's not the easiest job to obviously hold or to keep, but it's also a difficult job to break down for those of us in our business. I don't know which way they should go. I honestly don't.
Talking with Chris Mooneyham from 680 The Fan in Atlanta. We always kind of break down several topics in college football, and one of the hot topics in the coaching carousel has been Tom Herman at Texas. Will he stay or will he go? And now that Urban Meyer has kind of ended that mystery of whether he's going to don the burnt orange, it goes back to, well, what's Texas going to do now? And obviously it's an attractive job, but has Tom Herman not done enough there to warrant this?
I think that Herman gets another year.
Are you too?
I believe he gets another year. I don't think there's any question about that personally. Although I'll tell you, on the Urban Meyer front, I think he said what he had to say.
Right,
I think if Texas, if Texas, look, remember they go back a ways. Those two guys know each other, and I think Meyer felt like he had to say what he had to say. He is working for Fox. I think if Texas comes in and tries to money whip Urban, I think he comes out of retirement. I don't think he's done. I've gone on the record as saying that from the day that he, quote-unquote, retired. I'm doing the air quotes here. That I think Urban comes back. I think it'll be a high-profile job. I think Texas fits that bill. I don't think that Saban is interested in going there, quite frankly. But I think that Herman, gets another year to get to 8 or 10 wins, preferably 10, I think is what Texas wants, and then maybe he gets blown out.
Yeah, I see that as well. I think he deserves another year. That's just a tough place to coach, especially with the parameters right now, with Texas A&M having success in the SEC and winning some recruiting wars over the Horns. I think that's what the boosters see, as well as the fans. And also, remember, they're expanding Darrell K. Royal Texas Memorial Stadium. And somebody's got to write those checks. And do you want to write those large checks when you're getting mediocrity on the field? I think those are some factors involved in what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, the worst thing he did was not taking that LSU job. You know where I stand on that. We've talked about that before, on and off performance of show before, and I think that he made a mistake not going to LSU. He knew that area a little bit better than he does, I think, where he's at now. He could recruit that area. He's done it in the past. I think he would have been successful at LSU. Don't know that he would have won a national title like Orgeron did, but I do think he would have been successful and a little more long for the job.
You know, one of the things about college football, Chris, is these games are scheduled like 10 to 15 years ahead of time, and we think the current players are going to be playing in those games when it's actually somebody in the first grade that will be playing in those games. And then you have the case of Coastal Carolina and BYU that slapped together a game in 3 days, with BYU having to travel almost 2,500 miles to Conway, South Carolina in a short period of time. And what do we get? We got a classic college football game where the outcome was 1 yard away. And, you know, my question to you is, was that a great moment for college football to see that you can kind of put together a matchup like that, turning out to be a great game?
Yeah, unequivocally, yes. And I'll tell you, I think both teams, in a way, I think both teams won that matchup. I was a little more impressed with BYU, to be honest with you, and Coastal after the ball game, seeing how they both performed. And it was too bad once the ball game was over. I kind of shook my head, and it was one of those games where I said to myself, "Man, it's too bad somebody's going to lose this ball game."
Well, BYU didn't lose. They just didn't score enough points.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was impressed with both of them after the outcome.
Well, we got everything in that. We got if you like tough physical football, you got that. Watching the BYU defensive line and the offensive line of Coastal going at each other was a joy. And then you had a great quarterback matchup. You had two really good running backs. And then you had chippiness with Zach Wilson getting the hell beat out of him right before halftime. And then again on their first possession. I mean, you had a lot of great elements in that game. It's just too bad that you didn't have a full crowd and the goalpost coming down. That's the only thing that was missing.
Yeah, I was really impressed. I was impressed by the fact that both teams really knew how much it meant to potentially win that ball game for their national pedigree or for the national the perception of what they could be this year, what they are this year, and what they could be next year and the year after.
But don't you think in a way it kind of, I don't know, just kind of got rid of the misnomer that you need to schedule these games like way ahead of time? Why not just have a clean slate and start after the season? And maybe you get some compelling matchups like this with current players, and you don't have, I mean, you can kind of slap together a game like this. Yeah, absolutely. I've never been a big fan of scheduling the games 8 and 10 and 12 years out. Couldn't agree with you more. I think that also can play into the expansion of the playoff conversation. These games that could be put together with either conference affiliations or an extended type playoff where clubs will get together almost in a qualifying type ball game to get into a national tournament, especially if a national tournament were to include group of 5 teams. You know what I mean? Right.
You have two teams win a group of their respective group of 5 conference championships, and then maybe they meet in some sort of a top 8 type of qualifier to get into a national tournament. And as we tape this, we got word that Michigan and Ohio State will be canceled this year, and past 2 weeks we've kind of felt this might be happening. There's been all sorts of rumors. Well, now it's come to fruition. And if there's anything more odd about 2020,
is we don't get this great rivalry. I don't know. I've got really dark feelings about this. I wanted to see Michigan Ohio State play. I understand why with the COVID-19 cases, but I don't know. It just sucks that those two aren't going to play.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you've now already, and this is just broken within about the last hour and a half or so, and you've already started to, of course, hear rumblings across college football. Coaches coming out and talking about it, the potential for, can Ohio State make it with the amount of games that they've played into the national, into the college football playoff? It's unfortunate. It's fitting, unfortunately, in many ways that we're now saddled with this conversation piece. I don't know how the thing's going to play out. I got to be honest with you. I mean, I can give you my opinion, and I think Ohio State will still get into the national tournament, into the 14 playoff. But measuring a team off of the amount of games that they've played is a scary proposition, and one big reason why, quite frankly, and not to derail the conversation, but I'm not a huge fan of a committee choosing the teams that make the playoffs solely using that as a way to choose the teams to get in the playoffs. But here we are.
Obviously, Ohio State brings some cachet to the national tournament, the Final Four, the college football playoff, and every possible measure will be made to get them in there, in my opinion, because there's just too much money involved. But there's also that for the Big Ten. I mean, you put Ohio State in the Big Ten title game, that's going to fill up a lot of seats. Well, you don't have to worry about that this year because it's going to be 20% capacity, I'm sure, if any. But a lot of TV eyes will be watching that game. And if Indiana slips in there to represent the East against Northwestern, I'm not so sure you're going to get the same rating that you would want with Ohio State Northwestern.
Well, and we've also talked about ratings as well. Look, a lot of people would be surprised to learn that ratings are down this year.
Yeah, 30%.
Across college football. Yeah, it's an odd thing. It's a surprising thing. I have my own theories. We've talked about that. I'll spare people that soapbox topic this week. But ratings are down across college football for myriad reasons. I think again, I gave you a few weeks ago my for a lot of people what would be a cataclysmic result for college football. Clemson beats Notre Dame in the ACC championship game, which I think is going to happen. And then both of those teams get in. What if Florida beats Alabama? And now Florida's a one-loss team, and Alabama's number one, and they lose that SEC championship game. Those are your four teams there. And then even if Ohio State does win the Big Ten championship, then does Ohio State get in? Because I'm not so sure. Yes,
somehow Cincinnati should have played somebody in the Big Ten and up their profile a little bit. That would have added even more to the intrigue, but I digress. All right, Chris, we've talked about a lot of downers in the last few minutes. We've kind of depressed our college football fans. Give me something good that you've seen coming out of the college football so far.
Something good. Well, we've got a slew of interesting individual performances. Obviously, this year, a ton of freshmen who have had great years. And let's face it, every year, no matter what side of the ledger you fall on with college football, when Notre Dame is good, college football is healthy.
Yeah.
I'm like a lot of people. Notre Dame is way up the top of my list of the teams that are not my favorite, but I love to follow. And so I think that that's one great storyline from this season. Also, I do believe that there are 5 teams that are probably clearly better than everybody else, and it's interesting to see how this thing's going to shake out. I'm proud that we were able to have as much of a college football season as we were able to have. But there is no question, unfortunately, to tie it back to the beginning of your comment/question. I do think that just like with every sport, we're going to look back on 2020 and just kind of shake our heads with maybe not a feeling of remorse with how the season played out, or a feeling of dread, but maybe just kind of a feeling of, woe is me and what a year that was, and kind of like when you have a bad year at your job, or a particularly bad year in some facet of your life, where you just kind of look back on it and you shake your head and said, "Man, that was a tough year."
Yeah, and I'll give you a short list of my feel-goods. Iowa State, the Sun Belt, and what we mentioned earlier, Coastal Carolina, BYU. Those are 3 feel-goods for me this year in college football. So Chris, tell us what you're doing right now.
Oh, well, you can find me on Twitter at Mooneyham on Air. That's Moon EY Ham on Air. I'll be beating around. No telling where I'll be from week to week. Just give me a little look-see. And, of course, you can hear me on The Fan, 680 and 93.7 FM here in Atlanta, or the 680 The Fan mobile app.
And he's a frequent guest right here on the College Football X. We appreciate his contributions. Chris Mooneyham, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, John.
Much more to come as the College Football X rolls on after this timeout.
Time to put a bow on yet another show for the College Football X, the OSG on CFB. Thanks to Chris Mooneyham. Thanks to Joe Cashion. Thanks to you for hanging out with us. And as always, thanks for being a part of the network, however you are doing so. Don't forget to download the OSG Sports app, available iOS and Android. You get notifications every single time a new show is up, whether it is the review in the midweek, if it is this particular show, the X, anything else that comes across our paths when it comes to sports in the OSG Sports app, available iOS and Android. Don't forget theonlinesportsguys.com for all of the words that are fit to print in the mind of at OSG Phil Cantor. Don't forget to follow us on social media at OSG Sports on Facebook. I'm at OSG Nelson. It is J Wilkerson 16. It's OSG Phil. It's OSG JDub on the Twitters. And if you really would like to follow me along in all of my adventures on Instagram, it is Cute Sports Guy, because when the boss says that's what you are, that's what your title is. So, once again, thanks to everybody for being a part of the show this week. Thanks for you for listening along. Play safe, everybody. Enjoy the games this weekend.
Thanks for listening to the College Football X. You can find this and past shows by downloading the OSG Sports app on your mobile device. And enjoy all of our shows from the OSG Sports Podcasting Network. The OSG Sports app is up and running. Download it today.